develop them back.
Right.
So, is that anyone that never got the horse didn't arrive?
Yeah, Placer County has a couple of MACs.
Yeah, they do.
And it's proven effective for them.
Yeah.
I think it's good, though, because they can kind of consolidate and get comments from their individual respective constituencies. It's good. Right. It sounds like these might be on. Oh, they are. There you go, Laura.
Well, we're going to give it till 25 till,
Yeah.
and then if Paul isn't here, we're going to get started. Unless I hear any other word from staff that he's over in the Root Center wondering where the hell the rest of us are.
He's circling the block.
Circle.
Where are they?
Oh, here he is. Oh, no, that's Keone.
That's cute.
Ah.
Are you going to wait about 5 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. He's in line.
So he wants to wait 5 more
Keone,
minutes.
we tasked you with finding Paul. Well, he probably needs help getting a parking spot.
There are none.
But this is the only time we're going to use Nevada City, right? This is a freak
We're
of
going up
nature.
to your neck of the woods here pretty soon, aren't we?
Is the September meeting going to? Way. 15 years. I hadn't seen some of these people in
What
that
year did
long.
you graduate from?
68,
68.
Palo Alto,
Are we ready?
and it was amazing.
Are they ready back there?
Wait, wait, here he comes. No way. Yeah, he's entering the first door. He's
Should we all stand
coming
up and
through.
salute?
We'll start clapping. Woo!
I'd like to have a motion to adjourn now that we're
We took care of business, Paul.
Well, you know what I did.
You went to the Root
You went to
Center.
the Root Center.
Wondering where the hell the rest of us
Pretty
were,
sure
right?
it's a habit. Yeah. And I was looking forward to this, too. That's the funny thing.
All right. I'll call the meeting of August 9th Planning Commission meeting to order, and we'll start, would you? Right,
Tyler.
Tyler.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Roll call?
Commissioner Heck,
Here.
Commissioner Duncan,
Here.
Chair James,
Here.
Commissioner Aguilar,
Kind of.
Commissioner Jensen.
Here.
Any corrections to the agenda? Okay, and there's no commission business. We have one consent item. Is there a motion? Oh, missed over public comment, sorry. This is the time for public comment. If there's anybody in the audience that wants to speak on an issue not on the agenda but does pertain to planning issues in our county, you're welcome to come up now and address the board. or the commission? Okay? Now we'll go to the consent item.
Mr. Chairman, were there comments?
No?
I was
Is
going to
it in
move
one?
approval. Yes,
It's in one?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
I would move for approval of the consent item to extension of time for Deer Creek Park 2, final map.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We have a public hearing on a project application for a development permit proposing the construction and operation of an approximately 64,000 square foot manufacturing and warehouse building for Zapp Manufacturing with approximately 24,000 square feet future light industrial tenant lease space. The proposed building would be used to manufacture, refurbish, and warehouse aluminum sign used in traffic control. So with that, I'll ask for the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Matt Kelly, Senior Planner with the Nevada County Planning Department. This is PLN 180020, Development Permit 18-1. There's also a mitigated negative declaration, EIS 18003. The applicant is Tim Corkins on behalf of SCO Planning and Engineering. The project is for the construction of an approximately 64,000 square foot manufacturing and warehouse facility for Zapp Manufacturing. The project site is located at 12615 Charles Drive in Loma Rica. It's in the western Nevada County. It's known as Lot 6, Phase 2 of the English Mountain Phase 2 subdivision, and the subject parcel is located here in hashed marks. It's approximately 7.02 acres. The parcel is accessed via Loma Rica Drive and also from Nevada City Avenue, and it's off of Charles Drive. It's located within the Grass Valley sphere of influence, within their long-term sphere. We did receive comments from them in regards to their development review committee, and the applicants revised the project a little bit based on those comments. It is located within Zone D of the Nevada County Airport, and the Airport Land Use Commission reviewed the project. They commented on it and requested that an overflight notification be recorded as part of it. The zoning is M1 light industrial, and it also has the site performance combining district. What that means is that anytime we have a development project or a development permit within the Loma Rica area, we have to look to the Loma Rica Drive Industrial Area Plan for guidelines and policies that are located within that document. The general plan speaks to the document and talks about how we review the project for the policies and guidelines that are within that. That's what the SP zoning district, combining district means. The general plan designation is industrial, which this is certainly an appropriate use for the general plan as well as the zoning as well. The project description includes it's a 64,000 square foot approximately warehouse facility. It would be used by Zapp Manufacturing. They manufacture and refurbish aluminum traffic signs. The proposed building would house approximately 20 employees. Zapp Manufacturing currently operates now within the Loma Rica area. They have a facility now that they operate out of. The building would be broken up into an approximately 8,000 square foot refurbishing shop. It would include a 12,000 square foot aluminum warehouse, a 18,000 square foot sign shop and materials warehouse. Zapp Manufacturing, according to the applicant, does not produce aluminum. Their sign blanks come in and they then attach their sign face to them. However, they do not have a smelting operation or any sort of aluminum production facility. The project also includes a 1,500 square foot office and as well as a 24,000 approximately square foot future light industrial tenant facility. This would be the staff report and the initial study analyzed this for similar compatible uses, and the environmental document was written in such a way that future uses, as long as they were keeping within the light manufacturing type use, could go into that space with appropriate building permits. The project would include 96 off-street parking spaces and paving of approximately 65,000 square feet of impervious surface. It would include installation of a new driveway onto Charles Drive, relocation of the minimal sewage disposal area, connection to NID water, as well as the installation of a supplemental landscaping well. Lastly, would include 2 on-site stormwater retention systems, the removal of 107 existing conifer and deciduous trees, the retention of 22 existing trees, along as the planting of new landscaping. It would also include 10 downcast shielded lights and the removal of approximately 14,000 cubic yards of material. 4,000 of that would be balanced on site, and 10,000 cubic yards would be exported off-site. And then lastly, it would include the construction of a 6-foot retaining wall. It would be located within a public utility easement, which is proposed to be abandoned through a separate process. And just to show the commission, this is the site plan. This shows the approximately 64,000 square foot warehouse here. It would have a solar array located on its south side. This is the parking area here. Charles Drive is located here. The project does include an area beyond that is over 30% slope. The English Mountain Phase 2 subdivision speaks to this and says that this area is not developable because of slope. So the parcel does continue below that, but there's no construction proposed. This is an aerial photo which shows the site from 2017. Just to show commission, this is an area where the MUSDA would be located, and this area, the trees are to be protected in this area. There's a condition of approval that requires that orange fencing to be placed around trees that are to be protected within here. This area also includes a couple of trees that would be protected. And then this is an oak woodlands. The biological scoping survey speaks to this, and there's a recommendation similar to protection of the trees. There would be orange fencing that would be placed along this line here. This is just to show commission that area. The subject parcel is relatively flat. It was previously graded in 2005. There was a development permit that was approved that also included the removal of approximately 47,000 cubic yards of material for the construction of Charles Drive. That project the building was never built. However, the grading permit was issued and finalized that constructed this portion of Charles Drive. This is just some existing pictures. This is from Charles Drive looking towards the site. This would be, these are the trees that are portions of these would be removed, portions of these would be retained. This just shows the existing condition. This picture is looking back towards from the subject parcel towards Charles Drive. This is looking towards Ace Welding, and then to the left is Ace Propane. This shows the existing site. This is the area that was previously graded. The applicant proposes to level this area off a little bit and then drop the elevation of the proposed building. So this just shows commission what this area looks like. This is the back side of the parcel. This is the portion that's beyond 30%. These are the trees that would be protected with the orange fencing. And then this shows where the proposed retaining wall would be. This is about the approximate location of the property line. Beyond this is a future mini storage facility that is in construction, or they've applied for the building permits. So some of the things that we looked at was traffic. The applicant did prepare a traffic memorandum which analyzed the proposed project. Charles Drive and Nevada City Avenue all function at level of service A. The general plan speaks to the proposed project would have to be at level of service D. The traffic memorandum analyzed the project and found that there would be 84 daily trips with 11 a.m. and 11 p.m., certainly under the maximum for level of service A. The future light industrial tenant space was also analyzed, and based on a similar type of use, it would generate approximately 20 peak hour trips. The project also proposes to export approximately 10,000 cubic yards of material. The applicant has indicated that they don't know where this material would go. However, the initial study recommended a mitigation measure and condition of approval 8.21, which would limit the movement of the material to off-peak hours. Assuming a 20-yard dump truck and trailer, it would be approximately 508 vehicle trips to move the material. This is certainly appropriate for this scope of project, but staff wanted to make sure that all movement of material was done outside of peak vehicle trips. This shows us the site plan sort of zoomed in on the parking lot. This shows that there would be 96 off-street parking spaces. The applicant has indicated there would be 4 ADA spaces and 4 electrical vehicle spaces. Condition of approval 8.10 is recommended to revise the site plan to show an additional 8 clean air or electric vehicle spaces plus 5 additional future charging stations. This comes from California Building Code, and so staff is recommending that this condition be added. The project proposes 42% of impervious surface, and the light industrial zoning district allows up to 85%, so certainly under the maximum impervious surface. The project does include 2 on-site stormwater detention facilities. This is the first one, which will be located under the proposed parking lot. Would be located here where the number 15 is, and then it's proposed to daylight out into a bioswale, which would then percolate out. Any additional overflow would of course require the project would of course require a stormwater pollution prevention plan. Any additional discharge of stormwater cannot exceed the amount of stormwater that is going off of the site. So this would be allowed to percolate into the soil. Any overflow, the Department of Public Works has indicated they would be okay with the overflow going into the drainage ditch and then making its way into existing Nevada County storm drains. This shows the second stormwater facility. This would be located behind the proposed building. It includes 2 stormwater retention ponds and then a buried bioswale, which would allow water to percolate into the ground. This is to show Planning Commission the location of the proposed proposed septic facility. The English Mountain Phase 2 plan showed that the MUSDA would be located here, and the applicant has proposed to relocate it due to the size of the building, and so this would be located along in front of Charles Drive. This is what the building would look like. This is site plans or elevations along the side and front and south of the subject building. The proposed project would be clad in, and in your packet is a memorandum which the applicant provided to update the color scheme. It would still be clad as in 2 colors. The first would be a would be a taupe sand. The staff report spoke to a sandalwood, however, taupe sand is very similar. Then that would be for the first 12 feet. The building would be 29 feet high. Beyond that would be the Regal Blue, and that would be for the entire parcel or for the entire building. I would like to point out that the building is generally in keeping with the Loma Rica area design guidelines. However, there is a portion that the south elevation does not have any additional architectural features on it. This is a artistic rendering of the proposed manufacturing building provided by the applicant. This shows the taupe sand and the Regal Blue, as well as the parking area and sort of what the overall building would look like. And then just to familiarize Commission with the area, this is suburban propane. This just shows some additional architectural, what buildings look like within the Loma Rica area. And this is another example of a larger manufacturing building. This is, the name's escaping me, but it's, yes, thank you. This just shows what a larger facility would look like in an existing facility. And then this is Fastenal, and just kind of shows what a large building looks like in Loma Rica. This is off of Loma Rica Drive as well. The applicant has submitted a preliminary landscape site plan, which is shown here. The conditions would require that a final landscape site plan be submitted. The proposed project would cover approximately 42% of the parcel with impervious surface, and it would include an additional 17% landscaping and 41% open space. And so pursuant to Nevada County Code, the proposed landscaping, as it's been designed, would meet our code and code requirements with the requirement of a final landscape plan. Staff did prepare a mitigated negative declaration for the project. It was circulated between July 19th and August 7th. Some of the mitigation measures that were reviewed and environmental analysis was done. One of them was air quality, and there's a mitigation measure which looked at VOCs, or volatile organic chemicals. Sometimes inks in screen printing and sign manufacturing do contain VOCs. We've written a mitigation measure that would require any sort of permitting from the Air Quality Management District and any additional analysis by them. The project does require an authority to construct permit from the Air District as well. And then noise, most of the applicant's manufacturing is done indoors. There would, however, be a propane forklift that would be used within to load and unload trucks. It does have a backup alarm on it. OSHA does require these, so this would be a normal sound. Sound is, of course, measured at the property line level. The applicant did not submit a noise study for the project, so staff has conditioned it, and there's mitigation measures to say that noises cannot exceed the noise limitations within Nevada County Code. The the project is located within a very high fire hazard area as well, so it would, of course, require a fire protection plan. And then all impacts within the project can be mitigated to a less than significant level. So therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project, subject to review of the mitigated negative declaration, adopting the proposed mitigated negative declaration and making findings A through C, and then approve the proposed development permit subject to mitigation measures and conditions of approval as they're outlined in Attachment 1. And that concludes my staff report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is there any questions of staff?
This is what I should, okay. I just noticed when I was looking at this that my personal residence is down the hill on Greenhorn Road and across Greenhorn Road from that. And I have, I guess, a disclosure to just say it's there, but I don't think it affects my ability to be impartial or give this a fair hearing. Thank you.
You can get a traffic sign pretty quickly, though.
I might. I might.
I think the last time we had one in.
Yeah, it was the propane
Yeah.
folks up there. Yeah,
Any other questions of staff? Paul?
thank you.
So the airport is okay with solar too, as far as glare goes?
They are.
And I'm just curious, this really probably doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's just, how much of the lot is unbuildable, percentage-wise, compared to the total? Just ballpark.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'm not 100% sure. The lot is, there's about 2.9 acres of oak woodland that's down the hill, so the rest of it would be considered buildable, subject to approval of the development permit. I can figure out the percentages if you would like, but
No,
it's
it's
2.9
just, I'm just putting it in my mind. When we talk about the ratio of the impervious to the lot, it's to the overall lot, right? Not just to the buildable part, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right. That's fine.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question regarding the drainage. Should I ask that now?
Yes.
It's been a while since I've been here, so we haven't had a meeting for a while. Let's see. Mr. Kelly, could you go back to the slide, please, that shows the overall, on the drainage, thank you. So what I'm wondering is where, you see this nice flat area from the photographs, and then there's a significant drop-off. Where do those retention ponds fall with regard to where the slope begins? you know, like if you were to put a topo on that, where does that 30% slope start?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I believe it would be, it's located along, there's the FR, which is the fiber rolls.
Right.
That, I believe, is the beginning of the 30% slope and where it would drop off from there. The applicant, based on their preliminary drainage analysis, shows the retention ponds located within a relatively flat area. So they have to be able to maintain that and then not discharge stormwater down that slope.
Okay, so the retention ponds then will be, you know, the bottom of the retention pond will be below the grade of where it begins to drop off. I'm just was wondering about slippage and when we get those massive storms, which we do from time to time, how that would affect the homeowner on the other side of that, at the bottom of that hill. So you guys are comfortable that it's fine?
Yes, I mean, based on the preliminary drainage analysis and the review that the Department of Public Works did, they've not indicated that there would be any concerns with that. Nevada Irrigation District also reviewed the project and provided comments. They had said that the project cannot sheet flow down the hill, and I mean, there is natural sheet flow that occurs because of the slope, but the project would not be able to increase that sheet flow down the hill beyond what is just normal runoff.
Thank you. And then lastly, those rolls, those, you know, the fiber rolls, are those like a permanent thing, or are they just only there during construction? Are they maintained or replaced on some sort of annual or basis? I don't know about, I mean, I've seen the product, I know what it is, but I'm wondering, are they there permanently or how are they maintained? Our project engineer looks like he might be able to answer.
Martin seems to know these answers.
I think he knows those answers.
I think we can defer that question to the
Okay,
applicant.
thank you. I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm done.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we'll have a report from the applicant. If you would state your name and for the record.
Used to be county's double mic setup, huh?
We're trying to confuse you, Martin.
Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Martin Wood. I'm a principal at SCO Planning and Engineering, and I'm here with the owner, Tim Corkins. And I first want to just give you kind of a quick background of Tim Corkins and ZAP. The business was established in 1969. It's been in Nevada County since 1979. This is the third project in the Loma Rica area that we've done with Tim. And this particular project started from a process of a feasibility analysis of multiple sites that Tim was looking at of where to locate his next business. He's kind of been, had the problem of once he builds a facility, and he's done 2 other ones on Charles Drive near like UPS right down the street. And after he's built them in very short order, he's leased out more space than he probably should have, and he ended up splitting his business in 2 different buildings. So it's a problem you want to have, a growing business. So when we started this project, we did a feasibility analysis of multiple sites, one in the city of Grass Valley, and we did a couple different sites that we looked in Nevada County, and this definitely was the best site for his type of business. It's right down the street from his other facilities. It was most conducive for the grading and the size of building that he needed to expand his business. And I guess I want to applaud the county also in the sense that a lot of the good work that went into the Loma Rica area plan that was worked on and finally adopted in 2008 is why he wants to expand his business in this area. And we think that's a good plan. And the other thing I think is important to talk about in this particular project is it has that employee multiplier effect that we've all been talking about for years in economic studies that we all see from time to time on different projects. And this is exactly that. With him moving to this particular site, he's looking to probably add 10 to 20 employees, good paying jobs as part of this expansion. And when he does that, he's going to vacate significant space in his other 2 buildings right down the street. And 4 of those businesses that are his tenants right now have already inquired about expanding their businesses. So we may see up to 50 employees kind of expand as part of a project like that, which we're pretty excited about and think it's a good thing. The other thing to mention, I think that's unique to his business that we don't see all the time, is he operates in 3 states. A lot of his business is done in Nevada and Arizona and California. And he's always wanted to, keep his base in Nevada County. And I think that was one of the main guiding principles behind the Loma Rica Area Plan, was to support local area businesses, to allow them to expand and prosper, add employees, and it bodes well for all of Nevada County. In terms of the drainage that I wanted to comment, some of your, Commissioner Heck, the drainage is broken up into a couple different areas. We feel, we do a lot of projects in multiple jurisdictions, and it's usually most effective to not have one large single drainage basin. So breaking them up, not only do they look better, but they also have the ability for better infiltration. So we have some subsurface detention chambers that are located in the northeast front area of the parking lot to treat the water prior to discharge and keep it to pre-project flows. And in this particular area, to your question, so we have a 2-tiered pond there. The reason for that is so we don't get too deep. You get extremely deep to try to get the same volume in one pond. So by creating 2 ponds, it reduces the amount of grading. When it's landscaped, it'll look better. And that area off to the right is basically a bioswale on contour, which is basically flat. So it's called an even spreader. What that intent is you take the peak flow and you slow it down through the detention process. And then if it's a very large storm, which we periodically have, it would then discharge into the bioswale very flat. And ultimately, if you have like a 100-year event and you have water discharge, you want that to return to a sheet flow condition if it does exit at all. The idea is for it to all perk into the ground. But in the larger events, if you have some discharge, you just don't want a concentrated flow on a hill. So the idea is for it to spread out evenly and basically discharge at an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch in depth. So that's the intent behind that. The area to the right, that slope that's coming down off of there, that's a 1.5 to 1. We propose to rock slope that. And just some details of the site plan that we feel it's a really well-conceived project in the terms of, good engineering practice. The walls aren't too tall. We have, 6-foot rockery walls, natural materials. I think it's going to be aesthetically, will look well. The MUSDA and septic area ended up in the front because that was the best perk rates. So we could have the smallest size. Although you have a repair area there, we're going to retain all those trees. A lot of times repair areas don't ever get used. So a lot of that area, the trees and the natural buffer and screening to the front will remain. For a relatively, good-sized building, it's not very tall in height. I think code allowed us to go up to 45 feet. We're under 30. I think we did some nice effective treatment with some of the stuff that we employed. We added a gable pop-out at the northerly corner is kind of the most visible from Charles Drive. We're several hundred feet from Loma Rica Drive. We added some awnings that are good for passive solar. They also look good. They add some architectural interest. We added some transom windows that are above some of the areas. And we've got the 2-tone paint scheme. Additionally, per the airport's comment, they wanted some muted non-reflective colors for the roof that goes with the Zone D of the airport compatibility plan. So we think it's a well-conceived plan. We're excited about it in the sense that we think it's a success story not only for a local business, but for the county and the Loma Rica Area Plan. And we're here to answer any questions you might have and appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Are any other members of your team going to speak?
Unless you have specific questions.
Okay. Are there any questions of the applicant?
Well, the one question I had that you didn't quite answer was with regard to those rolls, the fiber rolls.
Oh, yeah.
Are they maintained? How long do they stay there? Is it?
No, perfect question.
Thank you.
So those get installed and those are maintained during the whole construction process, and those are part of the SWIP document, the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. And those generally stay in place until the permanent BMPs are put in place, which is our ultimate landscape plan. So,
okay, got
so
it.
Basically, we won't be doing any grading below that, but there'll be probably some hydro seeding, and then all the lush landscaping for the landscape plan will be basically from that area north all the way up to Charles Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Looks like a good project.
Yeah, it does. With that, I'll open public hearing and see if there's anybody in the audience that would like to speak. If you do, if you would please come up here and give your name, right up here. We got a spotlight right there.
This is a nice building, but it's not quite as easy as where we normally meet, is it? So, good morning, afternoon. I'm Keone Allen, Sierra Foothills Construction Company in Grass Valley. And I have a couple of thoughts for you today, but since those couple of thoughts turned into more than a couple sentences, I had to write them down. So, really, it's quite simple. We have an application for a large building that the owner has a very specific use for. And as Martin did a good job of pointing out, he could have chosen to build this new building anywhere, but he chose to build here. And, you know, that's really good for all of us, for every one of us. And he did this knowing that the cost of construction in Nevada County, because of our topography, et cetera, is going to cost him more money. I mean, we have 10,000 yards of export. That's not going to be cheap. That's probably a $100,000 bill. So I would submit that all of us owe him a speedy and simple process that honors his needs and minimizes the blurring of the land use versus architectural design process. He just has a really specific need for what he's open for. So my second thought is, as always, Brian and his planning staff has done their usual excellent and thorough job with the report and the conditions of approval. We've even identified the hours of the day that we can get on the road to export the huge amount of dirt. I mean, it's very, very well done, as always. So my hope is that we'll approve this application without any additional conditions or restrictions, and let's get him started. Thank you.
Hey, Keone, didn't staff bring up something that they wanted in addition?
The EV parking.
Oh, the EV parking.
Yeah.
So is your client okay with the extra EV parking?
I would expect it's going to be a part of the plans, and that's typical. You know, we started building those a few years ago, and it's commonplace now.
That's state law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else wish to speak on this particular application? Well, with that, I'll close the public hearing.
You ready for a motion, or do you want to have discussion?
Was ready for a motion.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, it would be my delight, actually, to make a motion to approve this project. It's a great project. I'm delighted to see you bringing it forward and to continue that development of the Loma Rica industrial area, bringing these jobs and expansion of our employment base. So, hooray. So with that, I will make the motion to approve and adopt the proposed mitigated negative declaration EIS 18-003 and mitigation and monitoring and reporting program attachment 1 pursuant to section 15074 and 15097 of the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines, making findings A through C.
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the motion?
Well said.
I'm going to say yes, it's an outstanding project. It's great to have
Outstanding. It's
economic development occurring in the county, and we're glad you came to the county.
Yes.
So welcome and staying here.
We're glad you're here. Thank you.
All right, if nothing else, let's have a vote.
Commissioner Heck,
Yes.
Commissioner Duncan,
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilar,
Yes.
Commissioner Jensen,
Yes.
Chair James.
Absolutely, yes.
I further move to approve the proposed development permit DVP 18-1, subject to the attached conditions of approval shown in attachment 1, making findings A through L, pursuant to sections L-2 5.6.G and L-2 5.5.2.C of the Nevada County Land Use and Development Code.
I'll second it.
You want to do A through M?
Oh, I thought it said that on
Other
there.
page.
Oh, okay, yes, with conditions A through N. Thank you.
I'll amend it. I'm seconding it.
Commissioner Heck,
Yes.
Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilar?
Yes.
Commissioner Jensen?
Yes.
Chair James?
Yes.
Oh, 10-day appeal.
Oh, yeah, there is an appeal period. What is it, 10 days? 10 days, so I wouldn't sweat it.
Yeah, thank you for not leaving Nevada County. Thank you
Yes,
for staying.
thank you for staying.
All right, next item. It's a public hearing to consider a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to adopt an ordinance 18-1 for zoning text amendments to the Nevada County Land Use Development Code to encourage the development of accessory dwelling units. There are a number of actions recommended to amend the ordinance, so I'll turn that over to staff for their report.
Great. Thank you, Chair James, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Tyler Barrington, Principal Planner for the record. The item for your consideration today is a proposed amendment to the Nevada County Land Use and Development Code in relation to accessory dwelling units. The file number is PLN 18-0070 and Ordinance 18-1. These amendments are before you today as a result of recent amendments that the county has made in 2017 to the county's accessory dwelling unit. That was in response to state laws that required the county to come into compliance with those codes. In making those amendments, several comments were made by the public and the commission, and therefore the board developed Board Order BO 17-02 to help provide for more incentives and flexibility in the development of accessory dwelling units. Those included restricting or defining short-term rentals as an accessory dwelling unit, looking at options for the owner occupancy requirements, which are currently the county's ordinance requires that one of the units, either the primary or the second unit or the accessory dwelling unit, be owner occupied. The third was to look at potentially allowing or requiring a smaller square footage. And then finally was looking at lowering fees for the development of accessory dwelling units. These are meant to help provide for long-term permanent housing for citizens of Nevada County at more affordable rates than your average single-family dwelling. So the ordinance before you does effectively implement that direction of the board and the commission at that time in 2017. It also provides an additional amendment which is related to state law that we didn't catch last time, and this was to allow for second dwelling units on parcels less than 1 acre. Previously the code, to allow them to be detached, previously the code required them to be attached. The state law previously required that the county not prohibit the conversion of an accessory dwelling unit or an accessory structure into an ADU, if you will, on a parcel less than 1 acre, and therefore it didn't make any sense to prohibit detached ADUs because someone could just come and build a garage and then convert it. The proposed ordinance before you today, in addition to doing that, also provides a restriction and defines the use of an accessory dwelling unit as a short-term rental, and that is being a rental for less than 30 days. It does amend the owner occupancy requirements, and by providing an option, instead of just removing it all the way, that option would be to, one of the units could be not owner occupied if you hired a professional management, went into contract with a professional management company to ensure the upkeep of the property. The intent here is by having an owner occupant, you have more, to quote Chair James, skin in the game in the neighborhood in terms of maintaining your property and not just having it be a derelict property that you're renting, if you will. Regarding incentives and fees, this is kind of a difficult one because the planning department doesn't have the purview over which fees that we can waive or defer or not charge, and the county is based on pay for services, and so therefore staff developed a deferral process to help try and incentivize second dwelling units, and this would allow for the road, which is the largest mitigation fee, and sewer connection mitigation fees to be deferred from the initially or originally you're required to pay all those fees up front prior to getting your permit. The proposal would allow those to be deferred to the point of occupancy. in certain situations, and those situations would be if you were to deed restrict your accessory second dwelling unit for a period of 10 years to individuals or families of low and very low income as defined by the state of California, and/or that you provide a second dwelling unit of 800 square feet or less. And then finally, some additional language is added to the ordinance because there's always been question about, do I need a second septic system or can I use my existing septic system? And essentially the helps provide a little bit more direction to the homeowner that yes, a separate tank would be required, but your leach field may be adequate depending on how large it's sized for. So those are the primary changes. Staff would mention there was a number of comments that were provided, which are provided to the commission in your packet. A memo was also provided to you. Staff has not made any changes because those comments kind of have varied direction based on individuals' own needs or groups' own needs, and staff feels that based on the direction of the board that we've made a good faith effort today to make those changes to implement the board's direction. With that, staff would recommend that the Planning Commission find that the proposed ordinance is exempt from environmental review pursuant to section 15061B3, in that this doesn't constitute a project that would result in a significant environmental impact. And there's 2 statutory exemptions as well, which disqualifies for updates to a second dwelling unit ordinance by a jurisdiction such as Nevada County. Staff would also recommend that the Planning Commission recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they approve the proposed amendments, ORD 18-001, specific to the findings that are contained within the draft ordinance within your packet. And then finally, staff would recommend that the Planning Commission recommend that the Board of Supervisors close the board order BO 17-02. So with that, staff is available to answer your questions, and thank you for your time.
Questions of staff?
I have a few questions. Is that all right? Sure. So I have about 5 questions. Enforcement of the deed restrictions to the rental of the low incomer. How does that happen?
So prior to issuing the occupancy, the homeowner would have to submit those deed restrictions to the county for our review. And the qualifying process hasn't been really vetted, but likely would require our housing division to review those applicants to ensure that they meet state qualifications as any project.
So when they go to rent out, they need to say, here's who we're renting to.
Correct.
What happens if, this is part of those questions, what happens if the low-income person becomes higher income?
Technically, they'd be in violation of the ordinance.
So it's
If
really
they
up.
initially qualified as low income and they had a change in circumstances, then they get kicked out?
That was the end of the question.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
And
Generally,
when do they get kicked out? The end of the year, the end of the lease?
And does the county
What if they do a
police that?
5-year lease?
Does the county police that?
or would the housing
Right.
authority be doing that?
Housing authority?
Again, we don't have all those answers, but essentially the homeowner will be responsible for maintaining that. And again, it would be a deferral of fees in the beginning. So by the time that it's occupied, those fees would have been paid.
That one probably isn't that difficult to figure out. I mean, when you make loans to low-income families,
Correct.
their circumstances hopefully improve in time,
Right.
and they still qualify for that low-interest loan. So I think that's solvable.
There's processes in place for that, correct?
So, and then the income levels are tied to California by county or something?
It's based on the county's median income.
Okay. Can the homeowner build the ADU, which they can't rent out for short-term rentals, but they can say, well, I'm going to move into the ADU and I'm going to rent my house out for short?
The way the ordinance is developed, they could.
They could, okay. And then what if someone wants to build an accessory dwelling unit for the sole purpose of short-term rental? Is there a process to do that?
That would be restricted by the ordinance.
Just in the county at
Correct.
I mean,
As the
they're
ordinance
not
is-
trying to get, the permit incentive and the low-income incentive. They're not trying to do that, but they're just saying, look, this is what I want to do.
Based on the direction of the Board of Supervisors, the way the draft ordinance is written, it would prohibit the use of an ADU as a short-term rental.
Okay.
No B&Bs, in other words.
Correct. There'd be certain circumstances, such as during an emergency situation where temporary housing would be needed, that would be acceptable, and doesn't need to because of that, because it is an emergency situation. But generally, the idea is to provide for long-term affordable housing for residents in Nevada County. And for the Planning Commission's education, the county over the last 10 years has issued approximately 8.8 second dwelling unit permits and 123 single-family dwelling permits on average per year over the last same period.
I have a question. Are you finished, Paul?
Thanks.
The ag community is a little concerned about this proposal, this ordinance. I think we had talked about this, I think 10 years ago, we were talking about the ag community and how they could better attract interest, going into agritourism and promoting it in the county. And we had, I thought, approved a program where they could have short-term stays on the farms or the ranches in ag areas. We had discussed that as, one seemingly easy solution for them to deal with. Does this then counteract that action that we took in the past, recognizing that ag is, a unique economic activity within the community, and that was something that could supplement?
This would apply across the board, regardless of whether you're a wedding facility, a private homeowner, or an agricultural operation. The county hasn't adopted any rules or regulations specific to allowing agricultural operations to have short-term rentals. Similar to a private property owner today, if you have a farm and you have a second dwelling unit, prior to this ordinance, you were allowed to rent it as you see fit.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if there's another way to look at it, that, this was part of an economic strategy to assist the ag community, recognizing that it was important for the county, and that we wanted to try and they proposed some ideas as to how to do it, and then we acted on them. Said, oh, those sound sort of good, and so is there not a way that we can continue to recognize that action that we took previously to encourage that type of activity?
Right, if you're referring to the agritourism ordinance we went through last year, I think, or early this year?
No, this is like years ago, where we all looked at it, and I didn't do my research in digging that out. But, that was something that seemed to be an easy enough, solution that could be implemented as part of their economic development strategy.
There's nothing codified that I know of.
Well,
do you recall, Brian?
We've been talking about ag homestays for quite a while. It was just maybe when we had joint meetings with the Ag Advisory Commission. Right. We've gone back and forth on it a little bit internally, but nothing has been codified.
But can we recognize an ag homestay as something unique, not like a short-term rental?
You could. There's a couple of ways to go about it. Is that you would have to define what an ag homestay is and develop develop its own set of standards. That's the part that we've kind of been kicking around internally and working with the Ag Commission over the years on. The Ag Advisory Committee, I believe, proposed an exemption in this proposal, or this proposed ordinance language, and I think it kind of ties to where the qualifier is for agritourism. I think there's a 5-acre minimum, and it has to be an ag land. That would be a much shorter fix, rather than going through and developing ag homestay standards and potentially permitting requirements. So if that was the desire of the commission, that certainly could be a recommendation to include the suggested language by the Ag Advisory Commission for the board to consider.
That would be good, because, it's part of, when we're looking at these ordinances, it's not just the ordinance. We're trying to holistically look at our entire county. What's good for the county? What do we recognize that is going to make us sustainable and enhance the quality of life for everyone here?
Right. It's kind of like you pull on the string over here and it affects the other part of the ordinance or another use. So trying to find that balance can be difficult, but if the commission was comfortable, I think the recommendation by the Ag Advisory Commission is something that could work. I'd want to look at it just a little bit more, but it could be a recommendation that goes up to the board for their consideration, for sure.
Thank you, Brian.
I'll pick up kind of where you're leaving off, because in that letter, the Ag Advisory Commission also suggested that there was a conflict between the proposed ADU ordinance and their employee housing, which we just also worked on, I think, this year. And again, just looking at the whole thing, I'm definitely in favor of exempting the agritourism from the short-term rental ban. And I want to make certain that we don't inadvertently pass something or recommend something that then has a negative impact someplace else that we're trying to do something good.
Commissioner Heck, the way I read the comment, and it can be clarified if I'm wrong, is that it refers to an existing ordinance standard that differentiates between second units and employee housing. And when we updated our employee housing requirements about 10 years ago, to be consistent with state law, there was a threshold at 5 units that kicked it into state permitting or less, which was local permitting. And so the attempt there was to not have additional units on the site that may or may not be used for employee housing. So if someone came in and applied for 4 employee units and had a secondary dwelling unit, they could get crossed with state permitting requirements and have 5 employee units. So in order to try to differentiate and keep them separate, we just didn't want a proliferation of a number of units on the property. That was the thinking at the time. And so in order to keep it, it's either all employee housing. If you have a second unit, you just count that toward your employee housing numbers. But it's an existing standard that's been in there for 10 years.
Well, we specifically worked on employee housing as a separate issue for the Ag group just this year, did we not?
It was for temporary RVs.
Yeah. Temporary RVs, but then there were other things too that came under that. Well, I'd like to hear what at the appropriate time from the folks here representing the Ag Commission.
There's also the separate definition of farm worker housing that wouldn't come under the second unit. And I'm rusty on it, so I don't remember exactly what it is, but that is out of the purview of the accessory dwelling unit.
They are separate.
Right.
Separate definitions and separate uses, correct. There's certain qualifiers for farm employee or farm worker housing versus ADU is more open-ended.
Right. Okay.
So where does,
Let's go to Bob over here. Bob.
Yeah. I have a couple problems with this. Number one is, we just had the fire up in Reading, and the grandmother with her 2 kids burned up, and from what I understand, it was in a unit that was behind the main house. So the emergency people came up, they knocked on the door, the front door, and got everybody notified there, but they didn't get to the back door, the back house, because they didn't know it was there. So if we're going to put these things all over the county, we're going to have some way of knowing that there's more than 1 unit on each R1 lot in some way, so that these emergency people will know it. They just can't drive by and see one driveway and assume there's one house there anymore. They have to assume that there's a second unit based on what we're doing with this. So that concerns me. The other thing that concerns me is somebody comes in here and applies for a subdivision. They go through all of these hoops where they have to do traffic study reports, they have to have park study reports, they have to do all kinds of studies based on a certain population moving into the subdivision they're creating. And now we're saying, well, we can add another 30 or 40% of the people just by putting a second unit behind them. And that doesn't sit well with me. If they can put the 30 or 40% more, then it's just not, I don't know how to say it, but it just doesn't seem right that by doing just one little ordinance change, we can double the population in the subdivision.
I'd like to make a comment in response to that.
Yeah.
First off, the proposed ordinance doesn't change where second dwelling units can be permitted in the county. It doesn't,
State law.
it's state law. It basically says anywhere where you allow a single-family dwelling, you have to allow second dwelling units. So that's one caveat. The other one is regarding how the county identifies second dwelling units. We do assign a second address number to those dwelling units. They are reviewed by the fire agency through the building permit process, so they are aware of where they're located. But because we can't prohibit second dwelling units, and again, they're not supposed to count towards density. And then regarding the subdivisions, we do our best to say that this subdivision it's 4 lots. It's 4 lots, but it has potential for 8 units. And so we do our best to try and accommodate that, even though that we're not supposed to be counting second dwelling units towards the overall general plan build-out density or the overall density of a given zoning district per the state law.
One other thing about putting a second unit on a lot, is when you go to buy a house in a subdivision, one of the things you do is you look at how the houses on each side are situated to if your view is blocked or not. And now you can come in and put a second unit and block somebody's view, and that doesn't seem fair to me either. Is there some way we can restrict them to single-story units?
I don't believe we can.
You can't. Thank you.
So it's whatever the zoning for that area allows, you have to allow for the second unit.
Correct. If you allow a single-family dwelling in a given zoning district, then you have to allow an ADU per the state code.
So if you're allowing second and stories and whatnot, you could have one for that.
Yeah, it's possible that the county may be able to refine that and be more restrictive in terms of that, but it does, the code does allow you to attach or be above second garages and things like that, the state code. So I think the county can't be more restrictive than the state law allows for.
And just to be clear, the state law makes it very clear, if we're contrary to the state law, we're null and void. So the state law is very clear on their intent on this, and it was driven by infill projects in San Francisco, where concerns that affect a rural county aren't quite the same as what the author of this legislation was thinking of. So, and if ours is contrary, it doesn't count. The state law will trump us.
To speak. Are there any other?
An observation, I mean, it is, it's hopefully also going to bring others into compliance, that there won't be as many rogue builders out there just creating units, you know, here, there, and yon, because there is a process, and to the extent the county can, they're trying to make it as fair and reasonable. Well, I know there are some people who disagree with how easy or reasonable it is, but it's an attempt, I think, to go in the right direction, to increase housing opportunities for more people here and hopefully to provide some affordable housing along the way.
In the report, you also mentioned that these units may qualify as for meeting your housing requirements and low-cost housing that the state mandates, but may also means to me may not. Do we know one way or the other?
Yes, we do. Basically, if you can demonstrate that these units provide affordability, and the county has gotten credit for the last 2 housing element cycles for approximately 10 second dwelling units per year. Our regional housing need numbers are much higher than that, so I think we got credit for about 50 units during our last housing element update, the 5-year cycle, when our projected need for very low and low was 300 units the last go-around. So we do get some credit towards that. We also qualify mobile homes, or manufactured homes, excuse me, as part of that affordable housing stock that goes above and beyond just the appropriate zoning to accommodate those units.
Okay. Any other questions, Paul?
Well, I guess I have an overall concern about the prohibition of the accessory dwelling units as a vacation or short-term rentals. And my concern is that, you know, any other year we're trying to promote tourism, agritourism. You know, we're trying to promote, you know, our downtowns. And here's my point. My point is why can't we just let the market decide, instead of prohibiting them as use as, the ADUs as vacation. Some people are gonna build the ADU because their grandmother, whatever, and, needs to move in there. And then, it becomes available. Well, some people don't wanna make it vacation rentals. They don't wanna hassle with that. Others are more ambitious, and maybe they wanna do it as vacation rentals. And so I think the market probably will determine this. And as soon as we prohibit, we lose our, we maybe gain affordable housing, maybe, if somebody's gonna, dish $300, $400 a square foot, so, so they can rent it out for $1,000 a month, or, we promote tourism. And so I think when we prohibit it, I think we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot in a way.
Over-regulating?
Yeah, over-regulating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I
I
agree.
truly believe some people will say, I don't want this as a vacation, and others will say, I absolutely want it.
You could look at it that the county recognizes that the lack of available housing, lack of affordable housing, are concerns. I mean, they're definitely concerns. And, if in fact this doesn't work, then, there's the ability to change is always there, to adapt. But it's recognizing that there is a pressing need in this county. And within the confines of government, this is the best way to, that they've come up with to go. And we're here to make that decision today.
So, see, and that's the thing. The best way to go is to prohibit, right? To prohibit.
Well, they're not
That's the
prohibiting
best way.
motels or B&Bs, others, options to go through the process to establish vacation rentals here in this county. I mean, that ability still exists. If at some point we find that we consistently have 100% occupancy rates in all the existing, motels, commercial establishments, I mean, then maybe, we need to address it and say that this is another opportunity to create some economic activity in the community. But I don't know that that's the case here, that we have 100% occupancy in all those establishments. And I know people like different ways of staying. They don't always want to stay in a motel or a hotel or a B&B, but I think there are other Airbnbs that are still going to operate. But this applies to new ones that are being constructed when people come in and apply for a permit.
Any other questions?
Well, I kind of want to follow up on those comments, because I agree with you, Paul. I think that we should let the market forces dictate. These ADUs require a big investment of capital on the part of the property owner. And, there can be 200, 300,000 and up, depending on how much they want to do. They're limited to only 800 square feet. So, I don't like the prohibition either of the short-term rentals. And I definitely would like to see that we would exclude that ban for the agritourism for certain when thinking about it. My other comment has to do with this idea of requiring owner occupancy, and I don't know where folks fall on that, but this, I think that this idea of bringing into a professional property manager to try to solve this problem that people are feeling might be created by not having an owner there, I think that is probably not a great way to solve the problem. I sort of think we let the market take care of that. I don't know, have we ever heard from any property managers around this about whether there would be additional requirements of a property manager, any additional insurance that would be required for the property management firm, and just how they felt about it? They probably all love the business, but I'm not certain that gets at addressing the problem. And the real problem is human behavior and how people treat their property, right? And that's very hard to legislate. And a property manager is not going to be able to say, you're a mess, you need to clean this up, and have any teeth in that any more than the owner would, actually. the only teeth in that would be the property manager would turn to the owner and say, you need to kick these people out, and then they would go ahead with an eviction process. So I really see the overlay of a property manager as being, not being effective. And then, in my comments, I had some real specific questions about, well, for instance, if you had an owner on site and they sold the property to the next buyer, is there going to be a property turnover police mechanism within the county to make certain that the next owner? Yeah, and so it seems like we have a process in place that's complaint driven. And if there's a problem, then it would rise to some level of the complaint versus putting some property manager in there who has really not much authority to regulate human behavior in a particular piece of property.
Yeah, Ricky, we hashed that one over when this came to us.
Well, we talked about
way
it,
back.
yeah.
Yeah, and there was a split decision on the
Yeah, I remember.
commission,
I remember.
about allowing, not requiring that there be an owner of the property inhabiting one of the units, but the commission went against it. So
I just wanted to raise those issues again, because this is the first time I've seen this whole professional property manager piece. And I was troubled a little bit, being in real estate, that it didn't appear to me that anybody talked to professional property managers to get their comments, and maybe there's some out here today we can hear from. And I'm also wondering if, if it was an owner-occupied situation and they hired a property manager, would the county then have additional rules that they would come up with for that property manager? And what would those be? I don't know, but then you have to ask yourself, if I was a property manager, I wouldn't touch it, frankly. It's to be too much liability. So those are issues for me. But, fundamentally, I agree that we should let the market dictate what's necessary here. So that's where I'm at. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be quiet now.
Any other questions and/or comments? Okay.
I have a property manager, and it's their job to find the people to rent the place. It's their job to kick them out if they don't take care of the place. And so that's what it's for. It's if that's what the county wants is for somebody to oversee the property. That's their job, is to oversee the property 360 days a year.
Good job, Tyler.
Okay. Now that it's all been clarified, crystal clear, I'm going to open the public hearing. And if you wish to speak, if you would come up here to the microphone, give your name, and we hope that you can keep your comments to about 3 minutes or less.
Is it all right if I continue to stand?
Sure.
I have back surgery.
Sure.
My name is Wade Laughter, and I live in District 1 in the unincorporated areas in Nevada County. I came up here 8 years ago because it seemed like a place where a bread and breakfast and a farm could flourish. And I lived in San Francisco for a bunch of years, dealt with the planning department in my business, and it was a nightmare. And what I've come to realize is there's some aspect of that going on here. Y'all are trying to solve a problem that, from near as I can tell, doesn't really exist in our county. The whole issue of bed and breakfast rentals. Most people who have a property like mine, I'm not looking to become a hotelier, nor am I looking to become a landlord. I do have my wife's aunt who lives with us. And Mr. Aguilar, you were talking about how much it costs per square foot to produce a building where someone can live. And a big part of why it's so expensive is all of this. All of the things that just went on for ZAP manufacturing. That's appropriate for a 60,000 square foot development for manufacturing. We're talking about a property where you could have a home for your wife's aunt or your grandmother. And employee housing is another big issue. There's this whole movement in our county that's really gaining some traction around farm to table. And from my point of view, agritourism is an essential component of that, because what you're doing, that's community-supported agriculture in a very direct way. And so instead of getting into the specifics of this, I really would just like to reference your letter here. Basically, most all of the points 1 through 5 in your letter of July 12th, I object to. I feel like as a landowner, a property owner, someone who worked his buns off for years to be able to buy a piece of property, I care about it. I'm responsible for it. I don't need all of you all coming up with rules about what if, to tell me what to do with my property. I would ask you to recognize that as a taxpayer and a voter, I care about this county, I care about the place that I invested my money into, and I've put my life into, and I'd like to spend the rest of my life there. So over-regulation is something that someone else mentioned up here. I think it's a real issue in our state and in our county. It's important to protect life and safety. But when you start telling people how they can or cannot use their property for something like a living situation, I think it's inappropriate. And I think, again, to one more point, a big part of the housing crisis in this state is what it costs to build a home. And this process adds to that cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Wade. Anyone else?
Commissioners, hi. Rich Johansson, Penn Valley Farmer, Chair, Agricultural Advisory Commission. Also in the audience is Chris Denay, is Ag Commissioner, and Susan Hook, Commissioner and Supervisor-elect. Your conversation kind of parroted ours. Originally, let the marketplace take care of what it does, because no one can replace it. And by restricting one form of housing is not going to give you another form. Affordable housing in California is kind of an oxymoron. I mean, because of the state regulations, restrictions, and the financial meltdown in 2008, and find a contractor, build one. So we went the route of the recommendation that this proposed amendment that would restrict short-term housing rentals would be a negative impact on our agritourism. I do not know one farmer or one rancher in Nevada County who's making enough money to make it just strictly on food and fiber. It's not happening, and it's not getting any better. We're in competition with the agribusiness machines from San Joaquin and Sacramento Valleys, and the water's flowing to them. The labor is flowing to them, and we have to survive by agritourism, by food and fiber, and all at the same time, I'll give you the pitch. We're providing, wildlife habitat, and we're providing fire protection for this community. I have a green swatch that's over 100 yards wide for about 400 yards that would stop any fire on my farm. So I'm just saying that if you're going to prohibit short-term rentals, exclude agritourism from that. And basically, in our agritourism ordinance, agritourism is allowed on AEAGFR, RA estate, 5 acres or larger, RA rural, 3 acres or larger. So that's where we want to put our, our short-term rentals. Okay. Then we caught the fact that Brian explained why on employee housing. We could not have secondary housing if we had employee housing. We need both. We really do. And an easy fix is just cap it at 4, or density plus 1. Somebody has 20 acres, zone 10, that's 2 houses plus 1. don't go into the state level. If we go into the state level, you know, we can build labor camps. We don't want to do that. Let's keep it, you know, let's keep it a community. So any questions?
Thank you, Rich. Anyone else care to speak? Come on down.
Hi, my name's Greg Zoller. I live in Nevada County. I've been a pretty strong advocate for the accessory dwelling units based on what the state had in mind, which is the shortfall of affordable housing. I'm very involved with affordable housing, and I just make a couple comments just off. And because of that, I've been actually suggested and been a proponent of the management part, and the reason that I had for that is that I wanted this housing to be successful. And oftentimes working with the clientele that I work with, because I have a program where we're working to put people into housing, I want to be sure that it's successful, that a lot of times you'll get at-risk clients and they will become a nightmare, and that owners aren't really able to manage. And so that's why I had suggested that, and also to address the concern of keeping harmony in a neighborhood, which is the second part, that the state made this regulation because we have a crisis. And it's not that, at least the way I look at it, and I mean, I agree with the market forces, but this is about an emergency and creating housing. It's not about restricting second units. And when I know that the biggest part that I wanted to bring up is that's really important, because as a builder and I have a lot of rentals, and I understand something about this. As a builder, I built on properties that were difficult to get septic systems on, and that's how I was able to be where I am right now, where I have the freedom to work with affordable housing and homelessness. And in the ordinance, and I've had some conversations with Dan Miller and Amy Irani about this. The weakest part of this ordinance in terms of being flexible is the septic part, where it just states blankly that you need to put a second tank in, which would add several $1,000s to the cost. And it's a prescription that isn't necessarily the best way to accomplish what we're trying to do, which is for the septic systems to function correctly and not fail, and ensure that that happens. So I suggested in my, as well as some other suggestions, but primarily this one, that there be a little bit of open-mindedness there. If septic systems basically work by digesting the effluent, solid materials, and allowing it to settle in a large volume of water. And then it goes into the septic field, and you don't want it to clog that. And so the rationale behind adding another tank is that it would allow whatever came out of the second unit to settle there, and so you'd have more settling capacity. But one of the big problems with septic failures that we have in the county is that people don't pump their tanks, and there isn't any, for example, regulation in this that the tank be regularly inspected. Today, oftentimes, if you do certain types of systems, you're required to file a deed restriction and have your tank regularly inspected, so it doesn't fill up and solids don't go into your field. There's just adding a garbage disposal or taking a garbage disposal out, or doing gray water recycling on the washing machine, or adding low-flow toilets. All of these have a big effect on the functioning of a septic system. So I would like to see, I'm not saying it should be one way or another, but I'm saying I would like to see the ordinance have just a little bit of flexibility there, that someone could come forward with an engineer and say, here's a way that it would work a lot better than that and save money. And because I know as a builder that that's going to be the toughest obstacle for building these right now. My focus was on just allowing people to build them, which the state had said, but then it was restricted for investors. But now the weak link in this is that people aren't going to be able to have the septic system capacity. And this idea that a second tank will make a big difference I don't think it's really justified. But in any case, why not leave the door open so that we can look at this? Because we got to get creative about housing and not just put it in black and white that you have to just put a tank in. So that's my 2 bits.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? We have an empty chair here. Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. Well, it's time for a discussion or flipping coins or something.
Or Tyler to respond to Mr. Zoller's comments about the tank. I mean, to the extent, especially when thinking about trying to make it affordable and the square foot building cost is high, if there is a way that perhaps engineering could prove us wrong, and you could do it. I mean, the time is creative, and I mean, this is as creative as government gets. We create more rules. So, but if we can create good rules that help people, that would be a bonus.
I'd be happy to answer that, Commissioner Duncan. Good afternoon, Amy Urani. I am the Environmental Health Director that Mr. Zoller said that he had met with me, and he did. And the impetus behind a separate tank is limiting only that the ADU, if it's just a living unit without a full functioning kitchen, it can tie into the existing septic tank if there's capacity for it. The minute the ADU becomes self-serving with the additional kitchen operation, which means cooking, which means increased fats, increased solids into the system, that will create a hydraulic overload on the existing septic system. The tank that's there for the main residence is intended to serve the main residence when it was originally built. If the leaching area, the disposal field, is large enough, with the additional tank, this helps to separate out that hydraulic burden or overload, and then that waste can again flow into the existing disposal field, which protects the main residence septic system. If an additional ADU with kitchen waste, and we can say we're limiting it to 2 individuals moving in, but we really have no control if they invite more family members. You could significantly increase the burden. And the main reason to prevent that is, as you add, if a septic tank can't settle, all of the solids will then migrate their way out into the disposal field. And what happens is they essentially kill off the good bacteria doing their job digesting, and they block it. They dissolve the biomat. So then now you have a system that has failed. The main residence now becomes uninhabitable, and the ADU becomes uninhabitable, and we have essentially put 2 families, for lack of a better term, out of their living environment. So to mitigate that, and again I reiterate, only if there is a full kitchen and operation going on in the ADU, a separate tank helps to alleviate that burden, and from an environmental health perspective, that protects public health and safety, because the leach field is designed for that capacity of the main residence. But we will allow the ADU tank to flow in as long as the leach field is significant enough to handle that additional load. Mm-hmm. I hope that answers your question.
It did, thank you. That was you were very clear. Thank you. There are some instances where people put in a larger tank than the initial residence calls for.
Sure.
That could have the capacity to service an additional ADU.
Yes, there are instances, but more often than not, even though they put in a big tank, they didn't spend the extra money on the disposal field linear lines.
Right.
So their hindrance not only comes in the capacity of the tank may be fine, but the additional flow in will overload the leach disposal area. So either way, they're either tearing it up to add another leach linear disposal line, or they're supplementing with a tank, which, the cost would vary depending on the size. You don't need a very large tank, 1,000-gallon tank or so.
Right, but so perhaps during the permitting process for the ADU, that could be analyzed, and if that system is found to be efficient and effective, that it could be used and they wouldn't have to incur the additional cost. I mean, the leach field, isn't that a cheaper investment than the tank, putting in a second tank in, expanding the leach field?
Yeah, actually, it just all depends. It all depends if they have viable soil.
Right.
Because now you're doing an on-site soils evaluation, so you've got one test ahead of expanding the leach field. And again, remember, the main residence has a repair area that's designated only for the main residence. So now when you're adding on linear lines, you're extending that disposal field or repair area as well. The cost could be more expensive in that venture as opposed to putting in a tank. And it could be very restrictive. For parcels that don't have viable soils in the area, you could be talking about a very limited process where now if you add that burden, even with the second tank, you may run the risk of failing that disposal field. And it's just the risk that the homeowner will take. But from our perspective, with the additional kitchen grease and waste, we feel from an environmental health standpoint that the public health significance of impact on the leach field, the main purpose of that is to protect our surface and groundwater. And it's designed to percolate at a certain rate. So if you're adding burden to that and that increases groundwater or surface water potential, that's where we have to weigh that concern. And adding a tank for a kitchen, full kitchen operation, we don't see as being an unnecessary burden in order to protect health and safety.
What is the definition of a full kitchen?
So full kitchen would be full operation. You are fully cooking, preparing, using oils, frying, doing the normal things you would do in your kitchen. You have a full oven, stove, you're generating all of that traditional home waste that you would in your own kitchen.
So it's not by virtue of just having a garbage disposal?
No, garbage disposals are horrible for septic systems, period. But
well,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be an education program for people on septic systems.
I would agree with that.
That could be an option, in terms of trying to alleviate the burden on the person who is coming forward to want to create a second unit.
So what I had done prior to this is I had met with we have a group of industry representatives, met with them to get their opinion, and then solicited all of the Northern California counties if they also, with ADUs, entertain an additional tank. So of the 22 counties, 13 of them require a tank and don't give any option to reviewing them hooking up to a leach field that's existing. They make you put in a whole new system. So they make the homeowner spend between $20,000 and $40,000 to put in a new system. Of the others, they're like us. You put in a tank, we will entertain using the existing leach field to minimize your cost. But we're all on the same page. Understanding the burden of the waste disposal into the leach area, being that we're all predominant rural counties, and the added burden of the new state law. The state produced per AB 885 the new on-site wastewater treatment system policy, which puts the burden on local counties to ensure that no matter what development happens, you're guaranteeing, as much as you can as a regulator, that that particular system will not impact any groundwater that services, say, NID or the home itself.
And I think, I don't disagree with you. I mean, yeah, I want to protect it. But in the event that there is some other viable option, that it can be verified, an engineer certifies that, this is indeed in place. I mean, I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity for us to consider that?
So we could consider anything, honestly. We could consider any proposal that came forward.
Okay.
In the consideration, though, if it appears that it would not be feasible and would conflict with our ultimate responsibility, then we would deny that and require the tank going in.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Well, what if the ADU did not have a full functioning kitchen as you define it?
Sure, and then if the tank the capacity is great enough for the existing home residential tank, and the caveat here is definitely and, they put in the allocated disposal leach lines to handle the additional capacity, absolutely, we would allow that. It's that additional burden of those wastes, those biological wastes that cause that burden on the main tank.
Thank you.
Maybe we should just ban garbage disposals.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I think we want Amy to come back to our other meetings when we have
I know.
health questions.
She is great.
I feel like I could qualify for an environmental certificate today, you know? All
Well,
right.
I mean, it seems like that, then if you don't have that full kitchen, it's not really the definition of an ADU. So it would fall under a different process. Yeah.
Right, just to clarify
It's
on
not-
that point.
yeah.
An ADU without a kitchen is a guest house, and so it's a different permitting process, and we
Or the
would.
traditional granny unit has been defined before, or people vision
Almost
them.
just like another bedroom.
It's just basically a bedroom
Yeah.
without the kitchen. And typically, we see a lot of variations of what a kitchen is and kitchen isn't, and they tend to expand over time. It's generally a one compartment sink and 5 feet of counter space. Anything that or less, we would not consider a kitchen, but anything more with cabinetry or a stove or dishwasher or anything like that would be considered a kitchen.
Right. All right, commissioners, what is your pleasure?
We discussed the agritourism option, and that you would be directed to work with the committee on that.
If it's the pleasure of the commission, the language provided in the agricultural advisory could be incorporated into the draft ordinance prior to taking it to the board.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we need a separate motion for that? If that's what we
Would be
were,
included
if that
in the
was,
motion.
or that would be included in the overall, okay.
Okay.
Someone ready to make a motion? Paul?
You know, I don't really like that whole prohibition, so if we're going to do it for the agricultural, I might be able to compromise on that. But, so I don't feel like I should be making the motion. And then, gosh, you know, that requirement of professional manager to maintain the property manager, how is that defined? I mean, do they have to have a business license in the city of Grass Valley or Nevada County or Nevada City, or?
They advertise in the union.
Yeah. So, I mean, is there a license that they have to have for that?
Well, I do know that if you want to advertise services as a property manager, you have to be licensed by the state of California. You have to have, like a salesperson's property management type license, and work under a licensed broker. But and then the broker may or may not have a business license with somebody. That's kind of why I got into some of the weeds on this, because what is the expectation of the property manager? It just becomes this very large, multi-tentacled thing. And I think the easiest answer is to allow, to allow non-owner occupied.
Yeah, I think I was on the short end of the stick when we discussed this the last time, and my concern was that, at least my experiences in 2 cities where I had some considerable responsibility for property management, and the frustrations that you get within neighborhoods when the person who, most of the problems came from absentee owners. And when you're trying to get the resident to clean up their stuff, because we were getting multiple complaints from neighbors and other folks, it becomes very difficult and very time-consuming. That was my issue. On the other hand, though, like some of you, I do have a problem with making somebody go hire a property manager because both folks or both residents are not, neither one is an owner. So it's sort of conflicted there, but that's my dilemma on this. I mean, to me, property management, and when I say, I mean, my property management, when I'm managing my property, there's a responsibility to, you know, to clean your stuff up and be a good neighbor. Well, a lot of people don't really care about those kinds of things. Then it starts to fall on the agency, because who are people going to complain to? Us, or the council members, or the supervisors, or staff, to do something, and they get frustrated when they can't do something. That becomes a big issue, and I bet it's a big time consumer for the county, as it was in the two cities that I was heavily involved with. That's my concern. Can we solve it? I don't know. But I do have a problem with acquiring a property. And when I first saw that, I go, ooh, that's a good idea. Then I start thinking, maybe not, over-regulation again. I think the same thing goes for when you have B&Bs. I mean, there's a controversy, usually in the cities, where some are managed very well and others, you know, it's party time and they have impacts on the neighbors, and then people are coming to the agency to fix that. So those are the kinds of issues that come up. So there's always unintended consequences with no matter what you do. So there.
And the answer is?
I recall you were the proponent for the property manager, or not
no.
having an owner.
I wanted to have an
owner-occupant on site.
An owner-occupant, yes.
Yeah.
Now, I can read the room and know that that may not go forward, but I'm not sure that I want to impose a property manager on top of that, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I can tell you the fees for a property manager usually are, you know, it's a menu of services, right? And, you know, you're saying you've got your property managers, but in general, kind of a rule of thumb is somewhere between 6 and 10% of the rental income of the unit, depending on that menu of services. So, you know, that can be some real money to the homeowner, and I'm not comfortable in imposing that on a homeowner.
Yeah, I'm not either.
I'm just not.
The other thing, yeah, well, I think we've got two ways to go here. Maybe two ways, only two ways. One, we can take an action today if everybody's comfortable with coming up with a motion that's going to work, or we can send it back to staff and come back with some of our concerns and input and see if we can get that at this again on a different meeting.
Commissioners, we have been scheduled for September 25th at the Board of Supervisors for this ordinance. So if you do have suggestions for changes, we're certainly happy to take those to the board. But if short of, you know, a drastic overhaul, I would ask you to make recommendations to take forward to the board rather than changes and come back if possible.
Well, two things I heard, if I can just leap in here now. One, I think we want to go along with what the Ag Commission is recommending. Is that sort of what I'm hearing, or what's?
That is true for me.
At least.
Okay.
At a minimum.
That's one thing, okay? And second, perhaps the property manager issue is an overkill. I'm not sure if the majority goes along with that. That's one thing. And what else?
I just wanted to clarify, the property manager is not required if the owner lives on site.
That's correct.
So assumingly the property owner that doesn't live on site has another piece of property and is using this for income only, and so the additional cost, while our additional costs are not necessarily an additional cost on their primary dwelling. It's kind of a cost of making that decision to have an investment property.
I'm curious about something. How many calls do you think the county or code enforcement receives for blighted properties or properties where the kinds of problems that we're trying to address with this regulation? You know, my gut tells me that if someone puts $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 into their ADU and they don't occupy there, that they are going to take care of, I mean, it's a market thing, that they're going to make certain that that property is taken care of. And if it's not, then there will be a complaint-driven process, and it'll go to code enforcement or law enforcement or whatever the appropriate agency is, and that there are regulations and laws that are already here to help facilitate that. I just don't see owners making this kind of investment and then just letting, the meth dealers move in to create honey oil or whatever they do.
Well, we have over 400 code cases, and those all involve dilapidated or out-of-compliance properties.
Countywide.
That are owned by someone. So, and those are just ones that are active. So it does happen that owners make an investment. Some of the code compliance cases involve renters, and some involve property owners. The county laws are set up that the property owner is responsible. We go through the renter to talk to them about trying to clean it up, and if that doesn't occur, then we contact the property owner, and they're ultimately responsible for any fines and cleanup of the property. Sometimes we have property owners that we can't get a hold of. One of the benefits of the property management system is just another contact to be made to help with working with the renter, being the go-between between the renter and the owner of the property. And it was a thought to have someone that's local rather than an owner that may live out of state, far away, that doesn't see the property on a daily basis, is not easy to contact, and frankly may not care. And then property management company would somebody that would be a little bit more local and an added contact for the county to utilize to, rectify a code case.
So it sounds kind of like, in your view, putting the property manager in there is sort of an extension, or to take some burden off of county and then place it onto the property manager and the private property owner.
Right. Any help
right?
we can get is appreciated, because those code cases are a drain on county finances, and so any type of additional contact help that we can get in cleaning those up quickly rather than dragging them through citation process, hearing process.
Would you
court
not
process.
have to still do a citation and hearing process, even if there was a property manager there?
Yes, potentially.
Yeah, you would,
But
I
we're
think.
hoping that would help avoid that situation in some circumstances.
I bet not, but I just have a different experience, so.
Yeah, I think you have a point there, Ricky. I mean, we're entering a new realm of a rental. It's, there's certainly a lot of existing housing, run-down, dilapidated properties that have not been cared for and do pose a problem. I guess I just don't see these new investments coming online as having that potential.
I don't see that at all, but that's just my thought.
Yeah.
Ed,
You guys.
What about?
Ed?
Bob?
This was brought to us by the supervisors because the county is short on low-income housing, and the state said that this is one way that you could get low-income housing if you want to. Is that correct?
This ordinance is a product of direction from the commission at the last ordinance update in 2017, which went to the board, who directed staff to further investigate and come back with an ordinance that addressed the 4 or 5 issues that are before you.
And to customize it for Nevada County.
Correct.
Right.
And
'Cause the
did I
state
understand you to say that we've been averaging 5 a year of these?
8.8, so 9.
Yeah.
Countywide or just western Nevada County?
Countywide over the last
How many
10
of those are in
years.
Truckee versus here? Just curious.
Sorry, I don't have that information.
So the units that we're talking about that the Ag Commission wants to put online, those won't be considered in the low-income housing units then?
if a second dwelling unit comes in, we qualify it typically as the very low and low income category of our regional housing need income, regardless of whether or not it's deed restricted or
Whether or not
rented to low or very low individuals.
So it doesn't matter if the problem's solved as long as the numbers work.
I think it's an incremental step towards solving the problem. That's the intent.
So what about if somebody has a second dwelling unit and they rent it out? It's a 2-bedroom little second dwelling unit. And the renter makes the second room a short-term use, like an Airbnb. Is that prohibited?
I think any use of the second dwelling unit per this ordinance would be prohibited as a Airbnb or a short-term rental.
Even though it is a long-term rental?
Even though it's long-term rental, again, the county is not the rental police. We don't come in and check how many people you have in your house, but the intent here is to provide more long-term housing.
Yeah, but see, it would be. It's just that the renters, I mean,
The renters could go
we
for
did that once. We rented an Airbnb and then come to find out it's in some lady's apartment. It's like, okay. So she's renting and we're renting from her with a cat. We're subleasing. Yeah, it's like, okay.
In order to afford the rent, you get a roommate.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I don't really have two. Number 2 is, and that's the the professional property. I mean, I see some of the benefits of that. That's not the one I have a problem with as much. In fact, I could go either way on that. It's number 1. I think it's good for ag to not prohibit, and I think it's also good for if it's closer to the city, because then it promotes. And just like what Laura said, some people don't want to go to the hotel. They like that experience. So that's the only one I really have a problem with.
Item 1?
It's just item 1.
Wait,
I'm
not following you.
Item 1 is actually the second standard.
to prove.
Which is
it's number
the
2
long-term
on the
rentals.
ordinance. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm looking at page 1.
Yeah.
I'm on page 7.
Yeah. So, that's
I just don't want the prohibition on short-term rentals.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's within the purview of the planning commission to add, amend, or modify any of the proposals in your recommendation to the board.
Yeah.
And I have a problem
Number
with
3.
that, and also number 3. I don't think it should be restricted to
Again,
only-
if it's the pleasure of the entire commission on a 3-2 vote to make changes, staff will take those changes to the board as with any ordinance.
Now we're looking at page 7, number 3, right?
There's even number 2 and number 3. It seems to be where we have,
Well, yeah, number 3, to me, is you have somebody coming in who's on a real restricted budget, wanting to develop something, and, you pile on all the construction costs and everything else, and then the fees. This was something I thought was appropriate. I'm not in favor of the restriction, but allowing the fees to be, deferred until occupancy, which gives the builder, owner, whoever, at least some form of break to get this thing built versus breaking his back and trying to bring in that money. So I like number 3 without the deed restriction. I don't know why we need the deed restrict.
oh, wait.
With a
Number 3 is.
Number 3
Well, I'm
on the staff report.
I'm on the staff report.
Okay.
Sorry. Number 3 is on page 8. It's the standard that's 10. 10.
So you're on number 3, staff.
It might be easier to go back to page 1 and 2 of the staff report.
Okay.
So I think those are bulleted a little easier
Yeah,
to follow.
that's true, they are.
So is there consensus here, just talking out loud in there, that number 1, we don't need, at least from the majority of the planning commissioners
I
here?
guess I was looking at it as this could be a road to more affordable housing. by having that available.
What
I think it still can be, again, it's a market thing. So what if we suddenly had 100 ADUs out there, right? And, and there's not going to be the need for that many more hotel rooms or short-term rentals, but there is a need for longer-term rentals. I just think the market would dictate where we are with that. That I agree, we need long-term housing. But I think the market will dictate. And of course, we're already restricting it to 800 square feet.
1,200.
Oh, it's 1,200? I thought it said 800 up here.
No.
800 is an incentive.
Oh, 800 is the incentive number. Okay, I thought it was all going to be 800.
They can go up to 1,200.
Up to 1,200. And again, gosh, 1,200 square feet times what? $300-400 a square foot? That's a lot of money. Somebody's not going to... people are going to take care of that.
Well, let me try again.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I heard a consensus that we're going to go along with the Ag Commission's recommendation. Is that correct? Everybody nod, so.
Well, I don't know that that's necessary if we have a consensus that we're not going to prohibit short-term rentals.
Okay,
Is that, am I thinking correct? Yeah.
okay.
So it seems like Ricky and I are on the same level.
So if we
Number
bounce
one
that
is
one,
bounce
we
it out.
solve both problems.
Right.
Okay, there we go. We got momentum going.
Eliminate number one. Strike number one.
The big Mo is working for us. Number 2 was the professional property manager.
Owner occupancy.
Owner occupancy is really the
Yes,
underlying
I'm on
issue.
number 2 on the report
On the
now.
staff report,
Yes.
yeah.
So is there a consensus one way or the other on that one?
I lean towards not requiring an owner occupied.
Me too.
Okay, me too.
All.
Well, like I said,
You could go either way.
I can go either way, so if
Okay.
that's a consensus, I would go with it.
Okay.
No property management.
Bob?
Bob?
Yeah, I go, no, there's no need to say no to a professional property manager. There's no problem.
Oh, if they want to do it,
If they
fine.
want to, they
If they
can.
want to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go
if
for
they
it.
want to, but to force that, I
Not a
think is...
requirement, though.
is-
Wouldn't be a
But,
requirement.
but what staff is saying is if they don't want to live there, they just want to rent out both units,
Right,
then they have to have somebody responsible.
Right.
And if the property owner isn't nearby, then they should have somebody that staff can talk to if there's problems.
well, they would basically use the process they're using now. which
Right,
is
they'd
complaint
contact the
basis
property
and
owner.
Go through the property owner, and that's what would happen. So that's the process they would use, the current process. Okay?
And just so staff is clear, would the direction of the commission be to remove the owner occupancy 100% from the ordinance?
That would be
That's the
mine.
direction I'm hearing.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All
Or do you
right.
want to qualify it by saying if they live out of state?
Oh, brother. Then you
Yeah.
can't, I don't think you can...
They're sloppy.
I heard Brian. think
Okay,
that.
number 3, allow for the deferral. That one I like, but I don't like the restriction. I think it's, I mean, if somebody can make a case that, and you got to hammer the hole, you're not going to give them occupancy until they pay their fees, so you're not giving anything away, you're giving the developer, who may need a break on the fees, at least from a time perspective, without a restriction.
Well, okay, so that restriction goes away after 10 years, right?
The way it's written, yes, it would go away in 10 years.
Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to, what don't you like?
They're trying to provide for an
Affordable housing.
incentive for people to build these things.
And to
And what-
dedicate it for low income
Oh, that's,
occupancy.
yeah.
I'm wondering if you can separate those two. It'd be great to have an incentive for everybody to build them,
So one
actually.
potential option for the commission to consider would be to just keep the deferral language without the options or the qualifiers of it needs to be low income or 800 square feet or less, if that's what I'm hearing the commission say. And basically defer those fees for all ADUs. which
I'd like
The
to see the fees
deferral is
deferred.
Available. I
Yeah.
mean, if they want to pay their fees up front, grand, but if they can't,
Well, I would be okay with the deferral of the fees only if it is a rental, long-term rental, not.
Oh, that's an
so you
interesting
can
thought.
be
But then you-
Airbnb.
oh, no, yeah, that's
A
right.
long-term rental for very low or low, or do you want to take that language out?
I'm for the long-term rental, I just don't like the
There aren't too
restriction.
many incentives for people to build exclusively for the benefit of low income. And given the high wages that are paid for many jobs in this community, that doesn't help people.
I think if the county's going, now, this is almost a supervisor's question, not ours, because it deals with money. But if the county is, my opinion is, going to defer permits and road mitigation fees, it would be because it is for low income.
If there's some benefit
There's
to
some
be
benefit.
derived.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. You can pay the fees and you can
Well,
rent
except
it to
isn't-
whoever you want to.
Isn't the benefit also that it helps generate the ADUs, the building of the ADUs? It's an incentive to
Yes.
get them built.
Okay.
So that's why I'd like to see actually better incentives than this, but maybe they'll come up with something. But I'd like to separate, or at least give everybody the opportunity to have those fees deferred as a method to incentivize getting these units out in the marketplace.
Right. So, in other words, you would like number 3 to be as is.
No, she would take the low income. part out.
Well, I don't know about the low income, but, that's kind of, doesn't feel like it's my problem to solve. What I'm saying is, I'd like to see the county give better deferral, or better incentives, and a way is to defer all fees for that 10 years or whatever, if someone's going to build an ADU. Because that is the incentive to get more housing into the marketplace quicker and more affordably.
This proposal is not to defer the fees for 10 years, it's to defer the fees to the time you get occupancy.
Oh, is it? I thought it was 10 years.
Correct. The
okay.
incentive or
I misunderstood that then.
what the property owner would have to do, the way the ordinance is written, would have to provide 10 years of affordability in order to
Oh,
qualify
10 years of
for the
affordability. I knew I heard it.
deferral fee and/or build a unit under 800 square feet, as written.
But if they keep it low income for 10 years, rented or not rented, but for 10 years, then they don't have to pay anything.
That's not true.
No,
They have to pay at
fees.
the end of 10 years.
No.
They get
Basically, it's a
occupancy.
deferral of fees from permit issuance to occupancy.
Oh, to occupancy.
Yeah.
Well, that's not very much of an incentive. I mean, really? Well, how much are the fees that we're talking about? 15,000? 10,000?
Less than that, most likely.
Less than that.
Depends on
And so,
public
it's
sewer or
like,
not.
oh, good, so I get the fees deferred, and then the minute I get a tenant, I owe the county a big check. Is that kind of the way this is
Yep.
put together? That doesn't feel like much of an incentive to me.
Again, staff doesn't have the ability to waive fees,
Yeah.
and therefore the
No, I
direction of the
know,
board
I
was
know.
to provide some incentives.
I get it.
That's
I
what
know,
this
we're
is
just
for you.
looking. I mean,
So really, number 3 is probably okay to just keep as is.
It sounds like it, but what okay, so then tell me this, then what's the penalty for the low-income person moves out and then the high-income person moves in there the following year? Now, the owner has already paid the fees. It got deferred for a little bit, but then.
didn't get deferred long.
Then she's already paid the fee, so then,
It'd be a violation of their deed restriction.
okay. All right.
I'm
Okay.
wondering if the supervisor out there
Providing
has.
long-term affordable
Wouldn't be a
housing.
smart idea to take the deferral.
No.
Yeah, then what's the incentive to take the deferral? I mean, it's really not an incentive.
You're committing yourself for 10 years of rent control.
Right, for a 3-month deferral, that's not any,
Well, but that's up to the property owner to make that decision.
well, but I think our goal here was to find an incentive to get these things out and built in the marketplace.
You know, Bob just made a great point. It's not rent control, though, but you said rent control. But even though it's for a low-income person, you can charge whatever you want.
Not if it's being monitored.
Not if it's being monitored.
If there's an agent in
There's a
charge.
consideration in the county's housing on what affordable rent is per family.
Oh,
So it
okay.
would have to be compliant with those.
There's a chart that's
requirements.
I didn't know
established.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're totally correct.
Okay, so number 3 doesn't sound like we need to monkey with it.
Okay.
Doesn't.
Think number 4 is a state requirement, which we have no authority over.
Correct.
Good. And then we have the issue of water and sewage.
Which we don't have a lot of flexibility on.
So I think our
So you either add it-
representative was pretty clear on that. At least I thought she was. Go ahead.
Well, so you either add a tank or you eliminate a garbage disposal. That's what I understood.
That would make it simple, but I don't think so. She's gone.
The entire intent of adding that language was to make it clear for the property owner because it was very vague coming into the county for an ADU, knowing whether or not you do or don't need a second tank. So our intent there was just to make it much more clear. So you walk into this knowing what to expect.
It sounds like if a person had a strange 2,000-gallon tank and a, then they would take that into consideration, like she said. Yeah.
Do you have to go to NID to get permission to hook up 2 residents?
For a water line? Yes.
So that'd be a step that they would have to take when they got their building permit.
Correct.
To do that.
If it's available.
All right, are we ready for a motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I will make the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, finding the project is statutorily exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Public Resources Code 21080.17, Sections 15061B3, 15268, and 15282H of the California Environmental Quality Act guidelines.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded.
Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilar?
Yes.
Commissioner Heck?
Yes.
Commissioner Jensen?
Yes.
Chair James?
Yes.
I move that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors adopt the attached ordinance ORD 18-1, amending Chapter Roman numeral 2 of the Nevada Land Use and Development Code section, Roman numeral L, Roman numeral 2, 3.19.1, attachment 1.
As modified.
As modified.
As modified.
Correct.
Second.
Commissioner Duncan?
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilar?
Yes.
Commissioner Heck?
Yes.
Commissioner Jensen?
Yes.
Chair James?
Yes. All right.
There is no appeal to this. It's only a recommendation to the
Recommendation
board.
to the board, and that's scheduled for when?
September 25th.
Okay. All right, and the upcoming planning commission meetings, it sounds like we will not have one in August, or the next one in August, and
Correct. There is one on September 12th or 13th, whatever the Thursday is.
15th.
okay. Any announcements, information items from the commission or staff?
Well, Dan Miller asked me to stay for another term.
Yay, that's good.
What'd you tell him?
Yeah, that's right.
You gave him one of these?
All right, okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll
Second.
second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.